What's up, folks? It's been a minute, but I'm back and I'm going to explore a bit more about my philosophy of guitar and kind of things that I've been working on to get myself out of that intermediate place where you feel like there's not a lot of progress. So I'm looking to just kind of explain some ideas and concepts that are worth checking out and understanding. They're somewhat talked about if you are able to find them, but if you don't know how to look or discern between teachers and all the information on the internet, it can be hard to really understand these concepts and how simple they actually are, and then apply them into your playing. So today, kind of expanding on what we were talking about before of, like taking a pentatonic scale and going through it with its full complexity. That was just an example I gave in the past, like taking one concept and fully going through it. And so with a pentatonic scale, you could take that, like I was talking about in my last video, you could do it in one position, like if this G pentatonic, right? And then you could do that in a second position, and then you do all the positions, and then you connect them, whether horizontally or vertically, you connect them in a lot of different ways. So you see how there's two different fingerings with the same sound, and so it kind of creates a decision tree where you can go in either direction. And so you go, right, so that's where the note repeats, and you find all of the similarities and the patterns within it that repeat. Instead of just going up and down the scale, you listen to chunks of it and you try and really explore it fully. And so while that is helpful, I think there's another concept that's worth looking at. When I started playing, that was one thing I did do, was learn those pentatonic positions and then try and connect them. That kind of came later, because I understood that it was necessary to like learn it on one string or two strings or something like that. And that gave me a good foundation for building on it, because I kind of think of the pentatonic scale as like the skeleton of the major scale, which I guess a lot of musicians would probably tell you to learn the major scale first, because it is the fundamental scale for everything. It's kind of just like 80% of what you need. But most guitar players, they approach things from the pentatonic scale first, like myself. So for me and for guitar players kind of trying to branch out from that, I feel like this idea of the pentatonic scale being like a skeleton, missing some notes and colors and sounds, is helpful, because if you already know some pentatonic scales, you can kind of get what I'm saying from here. But I guess what we can start with is over here at the C. And that's what everybody likes to use always. It's the most basic key, C, up here. This bar chord. So we're going to kind of blend those two ideas a little bit, where you take a C major scale, and first you understand the skeleton there, which is the pentatonic scale. So I guess you don't take a C major scale, you just take the pentatonic first, and then we're going to build it to become the C major scale. So if you know the major pentatonic, right? know. If you just know like a minor pentatonic position, this might be a little difficult, but if you know like A minor pentatonic, you may have heard the idea that that is simultaneously the C major pentatonic at the same time, based on what you emphasize. So if you go, that's A minor, but if you do the same notes in the same place, you just start here, instead of here, you go. Same notes, different sound, right? Same thing applies to all the positions, to every part of the pentatonic scale, right? That's your C. That's your A. If you root down there, so it's a little bit of a slide to that position to make it fit the ear, to explain what I'm saying there. But from here, what we're doing is, so we're taking this C major pentatonic, and we're looking at it like a skeleton that's missing some components. And so to figure out what we have here, you could think about it with note names and all that stuff, but I think that's less helpful in the beginning if you're just trying to take a basic understanding of pentatonics and make it more useful and practical. I think you can just think about the Nashville number system. So like 1, that's C, that's the 1. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 1. And that may not make sense quite yet, but when we go to the major scale, you'll see why. Now, this is the most basic major scale that everyone learns, usually first, is right. That C major scale is in the exact same spot as that pentatonic, that major pentatonic. And so what we're doing here is seeing how they compare and what the differences are. And so if you were to give those same numbers to that C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 1. You just count to 7 with each. It's 8 notes. So you count them. And then if we go back to what we did before with the pentatonic, 1, 2, 3, 5, because you skip 1 there. 6. And then 8, because you skip 1 there. So we skip this one. And it sounds like this. Instead of, so that 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 is what we skipped there. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the other one we've skipped, if you listen now. So this one and this one. Those are the two we've skipped. The 4 and the 7. So now we have and so that's maybe a little bit confusing, but if you just really break it down, go slow and look at it, and always remember to kind of be present and move slowly and really just be gentle with yourself. Don't get all heated and confused if it seems weird to comprehend this. But really what we can do from here is explore this a little bit further. So if we can see the difference of the 4 and the 7, right? the sounds, because a big piece of this is really understanding the sounds and kind of internalizing what they feel like, what they sound like, how they kind of make you feel. So it would be, you could find this note down here, so you can play it simultaneously. You get the... sounds. And the key difference is those sounds don't exist in the pentatonic, right? Now, what we can do from here is take that same idea of understanding and fully exploring a concept even further. Because what we've done is we've seen the difference between those two. And now we can take that to understand the major scale even further. A basic way that I go about doing that is, instead of just playing up and down the scale, you want to start to understand what's going on in there more. So at the first layer, we understand the 4 and the 7 are the extra notes that make the pentatonic the major scale, right? But then we can take it like this. Instead of going like this, we go. So that's 1, 3, 2 instead of 1, 2, 3. And so it's the same note, same sound, but it's scrambled a little bit. And so it gives you more creative understanding of the scale. And we're going to build on this a little more to see where this goes in a much more helpful way. This here is more of just an exercise for your ears and fingers too. So you've kind of just scrambled the scale up a little bit. You can do that going down too. Wow. To really listen, go slow and pay attention, and make sure you're hearing it properly, because I just made a mistake there, but I was able to notice it and correct it. And so that's what you want to be able to do, is identify when the sound is right versus when the sound is wrong. It's the same way you would go, and you know that was a wrong note just by hearing it. Right? And because it's just kind of linearly playing up the scale, it's easy for your ear to hear that that was a wrong note. But then when you start going like this, it makes it like a little bit more of a challenge for your ear to understand what's wrong and what's right. And so it helps you develop that. And then, moving from there, we can expand this a little bit further towards the most practical concept ever. And there's a lot of ways to approach it. There's a lot of ways to expand it fully as a concept in itself. But for now, we're just exploring the major scale in one position, in one place, and fully exploring that, which involves understanding this concept. But then you could then zoom in on this concept after that, and you could keep zooming in on different aspects of it. Which takes a long time to really understand how all that works. But at the base level here, what we're talking about is triads, which you might have heard of. It's kind of the foundation of everything. And a triad means 3 notes. Tri, from triangle, right? So what you do is you make 3 notes together. So now, which specific notes? I think that's something to get into when you're doing more understanding of it. for now, we're just trying to get the sound under the sound in our ears and the shapes under our fingers and see how it relates to the major scale and the pentatonic scale. But there are formulas and ways of understanding why these chords are built like the way that they are. But so basically, you go from these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. You go 1, 3, 5. So, and because of that exercise, we know where 1, 3 is. So we were going 1, 3, 2. Right? So what we're doing now is going 1, 3, 5 instead of 1, 3, 2. Does that make sense? But then we move there, which is takes a little bit of thinking here because we're still doing 1, 3, 5, even though this was 1, 3, 5, which might be confusing. But if you just take the next note in the scale and you think of that as 1, you find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in reality, in relationship to the scale, it's 1, 2. So it's actually 2, 4, 6 in relationship to this note, right? But we want to think about it like 1, 3, 5. And then 1, 3, 5 again, starting from there. Wow. It's easy to get lost doing this, but then you go. So what we've done there is 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5. That's that last one. But what you get is a triad, so 3 notes, built from each note of the scale, which becomes all the chords in that key, all the basic triads in that key. And so if you can start to visualize how those exist within, if you can start to see how those exist within that bigger structure of the scale, then you can navigate better. And it doesn't just sound like you're going. Right? It sounds more like. Something like that. You get a little bit more directionality and you know what you're doing more. And so, I guess a bite-sized way to approach that would be to do that in this one position to the 2 octaves. Then work on this. Which I'm still working on because it's easy to get confused when you're in there, but it's to get that scrambled up idea going, and then there we go. So it's to get that in both of those octaves, right? Then the get those triads in both of those octaves and to pay attention to what is what. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, 5, there it is, 6, 7, 8. So, it's seeing how each of those exists within those 2 octaves. And that's probably a good place to start to really start to understand what's going on in there. And I guess another piece of this would be to then connect the 2 to build the full arpeggio of the triad, the 2 octaves. So instead of just you go right, now we're starting the next octave. So that's the first octave, that's the next octave, right? And then you have the next octave. So you have the C chord mapped over this whole area of the fretboard. In 3 octaves. And for the sake of time, I don't think I'll explain how that applies to the rest of them, but logically you can understand that from there you go, you do the 2 and you go, okay, well what was it? So now you have this, the 2 chord, which at this point you might want to start to understand what the actual note names are of a D. So that's a D minor in that position in multiple octaves. And so you can see how it maps out, and then you go to the E, and then the F and G, and you do that all in that one area. And you start to see how those different chords are built there. And then each time you do that, always check back to the basic skeleton of the pentatonic and the basic major scale after you do each of these arpeggios, so you can see how they overlay and which notes are common and which notes are not common. So that's the concept that I kind of wanted to get into today. I think it's more of a theoretical understanding kind of concept. But from there, like I've talked about in the past, kind of within your practice framework, that's an idea to explore in the way that I explained it. But the key, as always, is presence and kind of arriving at the practice session in a relaxed mindset that isn't forcing and grasping for just needing progress or needing something out of it. You should be present and take it for what it is, and not be so tense. And from there, you could explore this concept. And then you want to try and apply it musically. You want to try and apply it in a way that allows you to be creative and explore. And when you're learning and starting, that's difficult, so you want to keep it very simple. And that could be something like picking a couple chords from the key, right? So you have 7 choices. lot of combinations that are popular in different styles of music, right? But you want, I mean, maybe you just pick the one and you pick the two and you'll pick the three. Then from there, what you want to do is understand how those map out, like I was talking about. The only one we didn't do was the E. Now that one only gives you 2 octaves, so it starts to shift and give you different things for different chords, but you still have the notes in that area. And it's good to understand the bigger picture of all of those arpeggios for each of those chords. But then to practice it, you just want to kind of take a chunk. And a lot of melody and lead playing that you want to be able to, you want to have an ability to understand these strings. A lot of lead playing is done on these strings up here, the top 3. So that's a good place to take chunks of those arpeggios and just focus on that area. So you could take the C, right? And you can just use these 3. Say that's your C notes, that's your C chord, right? And then you go, okay, we wanted the D next, which is going to be from and if you look, I mean, that's just that deep bar chord that we all learned pretty early on in our playing. It's just that top portion of it. And this one, the C, is just that top portion of that as well. But you've learned the little extra notes around that C bar chord, like this one, right? But you really just focus it up here and up here, and then for the E. So there's your E. So it's all in one little area. You're only moving in these 4 frets here. So you could look at that in a bunch of different ways and start to analyze how those connect. But simply, you could probably just put on a backing track and try and find these 3 chords, specifically just isolated in a backing track, and try and groove over them just by even just picking the top string. some extra notes towards the end of like, but mostly I'm just kind of building off of, right, that top note of the C, the top note of the D, and the top note of the E, and eventually you'll understand what those notes are and how it all connects. But for there, I mean, the first thing I did was super simple. And you start to get a melody, and also, like I've explained, you want to connect it to your voice as best you can. So you start hearing that and you go, and you can build a little melody, right? So something like that. And you start to just have a little fun with those triads. You can pick other chunks of those bigger arpeggios and do the same thing. But you want to pick a little section and work within it. Understand it. And see where it connects to visually in your mind's eye on the fretboard in that area. But that'll get you where you need to be if you just focus on that for a while. And it's deceptively complicated because it is simple, but there's a lot of foundational work that needs to be done to really understand and apply that comprehensively before you really start to feel like you know what you're doing with more complex music and more complex things.